Hello everybody. I hope you can hear me loud and clearly, even in the back seats. I'm very happy to be here with Shujia again at Troopers. We've been here a couple of times, and at the previous conferences at Troopers we have talked about a lot of different vulnerabilities in SAP applications and servers, like very good other talented, intelligent researchers have as well. So in the past, we have talked about vulnerabilities such as SQL injection in SAP, command injections in SAP, ABAP code injections in SAP, backdoors in SAP, strange privilege elevation techniques in SAP, buffer overflows in SAP, client problems in SAP, lots of problems in SAP software, but no one has ever talked about the problems the customers produce themselves. So this talk is not about faults in SAP as a software company, but faults by adding custom code to your SAP installation. Which means by adding code that is poorly written. And the key question is, of course, if you talk about code security with companies, do you have policies, of course, policies for coding? And they say, yeah, we trust our developers. They can do what they do very good. We have no problems. We trust our SAP systems are sound. And there are no mistakes in our ABAP code. But the point is, these companies don't know. And you have to really show them they're wrong. And this is what we have done. We have been to a lot of companies. We have scanned one of their SAP systems, the custom code of one of their SAP systems, and we have made an analysis about the problems in there and created an overall benchmark, which we present the first time ever today. So the first conference we talk about this, and as you can read, we have scanned approximately 450 million lines of ABAP code only at SAP customers. So again, this is not about SAP problems. You can, all the guys from SAP here in the audience can relax. We are not talking about O-days or anything like that in your standard. So I'm also very happy that the Troopers conference again made a specific sub-security track, because this increases the number of people that are in the audience, people that are really focused on SAP security, and that they're not just popping in because they're basically here because of the TV hacking talk, and now they pop in here. No, this is really good. It helps the community to do that. It helps to improve security in SAP systems in general. Thank you very much, Anna, for this. So what's this talk about? First, we need to give a little background on what is SAP and what is specific to SAP. I know many people in the audience already know that. Many of my colleagues are also here. We know what's special in SAP, but some people watching this maybe later on the internet, they don't know that. That's why we give some basic, not too long information about SAP in general. Then we talk about the custom code statistics that we have gathered, and we can, I hope, we can talk about that with the audience as well. Hope for interaction here. And finally, we propose some best practices you may follow in order to get the situation better in your company over the next couple of months/years. Why don't I use this? So first, a little bit about me and about Shu, what we've been doing. We are SAP security researchers for quite some time. We have discovered a considerable amount of vulnerabilities in the SAP standard, which we have reported to SAP in all instances, and SAP has issued patches and given us credit on a rather unknown web page at the SAP community network. Usually nobody in the audience knows about that page, so I don't bother proposing that to you. But anyway, there is a page which gives credit for security researchers, and we've talked about all the vulnerabilities, or a fair amount of them, at various conferences. But we have also contributed some of the results of our work to communities like the German SAP user group or the German Federal Office of Information Security, the BSI. So many people do not really know that SAP systems are really assets to the German industry, to the world industry, to companies that run them. So here's a slide which we have used more than once to convince people that SAP security really matters. Why should we protect SAP systems? Because a real lot of companies run SAP, and the business of those companies depends on the stability of the SAP system. So, for example, these SAP customers transport 1.1 billion flight passengers per year, produce 65% of all TVs, 77,000 cars per day, and a lot of movies. So without those companies being productive, all of this would not be possible, which to some extent could be acceptable, but there's one final statistic about companies that depend on SAP, which should convince all of us to really invest research in that area. So this is what keeps us motivated to find more problems, report them, and get them fixed. So, some basics about SAP Custom Code. Basically, all customers that run SAP write some additional code in order to adapt the SAP standard to their specific business purposes. Probably all, I cannot prove that. I haven't talked with all 248,000, but I think a real fair amount of them does that. So they do this, one, through internal development teams, so they have their own developers that enhance the standard, or B, they use external developers, which means they hire freelancers or they outsource to somebody that again outsources to someone else, and so the code is somehow built and brought into the company and hopefully does what it's supposed to do. So this is the first thing about SAP development. You cannot, in the end, trust the code you're running because you do not build all of the code yourself in many cases. Not in all cases. Some companies do this only internally, but on the other side, there are some companies that do it only externally. So this raises the question of the A, the quality of the code, and B, the security integrity of the code. But this is more a philosophical question and cannot be answered by statistics, but we get to that back later. So, interestingly, if you talk to SAP customers and ask them, can you show me your development guidelines? What are they like? What do you focus on in your custom code development? What is the one thing everybody looks at in SAP? Anybody knows that? Thank you very much. Naming conventions. What is naming conventions? Naming conventions is a method that separates the custom code from the SAP standard. So if you write custom code, you need to stick to certain conventions, so you cannot overwrite SAP standard code. All your programs must start with a Z or a Y, and you must clearly separate that. And the problem is if your company writes a program called ZDemo and someone else, external company you hire, also writes a program ZDemo, you try to transport that into your system, it overrides your own code. So you need clear guidelines how to keep that separate. That's naming convention. And that's what customers mostly focus on, which is definitely a good thing, but it has nothing to do with security, nor with performance or robustness or maintainability of your code. It's good, yes, but from a security perspective, there is no good guideline in the companies, because they focus on the wrong area. So the substandard, on the other side, delivers some rudimentary tools for static and dynamic code analysis, for example, for performance testing of the code, for basic flaws in the code that can be there, which companies can use or don't. Some use them, some don't use them, but this is the situation. And some minor detail about that these tools do not really have metrics to measure the volume of the code. So if you ask an SAP customer, how much code have you written? The question is always, I have no idea. They can tell you a lot, or like maybe 100 packages of code, but how many lines of code? Nobody knows that. So this was the first thing that we wanted to solve with our benchmark, to understand how much code have companies really written per system. So here are some more subspecifics which are important to understand for the problems we are talking about a little bit later in our analysis here. So first of all, subsystems are designed to run independent of the operating system and the database. So basically you can develop your application this year on a Microsoft system and maybe in 2 years move it over to Windows system. Sorry, Microsoft, I didn't get money for that. Move it over to a Linux system and it should still run the same. Same as with databases. You use one database and maybe you then migrate to another and it still runs. So this is the basic design of SAP. So SAP also has a specifically designed proprietary front end called SAP GUI. It's like a web browser, not web, but it's a browser, a very big fat client that gives you access to SAP and provides a lot of functionality to interact with the backend. So also in SAP, in the business world, there are specific requirements and regulations when accessing data. You need authorization to access important business data. You need authorization for reading, for changing this data. It's very important. And if you change anything, you need change documents. Which document are? The user Wiegenstein on this day changed the user record of his colleague Shujia by editing his password. Something like that needs to be in the SAP system so you can really have an audit trail of what's going on and your business transactions are really reliable and auditable. So also, you can in one sub-database host the data of multiple different organizations. SAP calls them clients. They're all stored in the same database, even in the same database scheme, separately of each other. This is designed by SAP. So you only need one database to maybe host like 200 different companies that are totally isolated, technically speaking, in theory. There's also a specific ABAP command called authority check. Most other languages do not have a command like that, which checks if the user currently logged on has the authority for a specific type of action you are performing in your code. For example, read access to HR records or something like that. SAP also has a proprietary SQL layer between the ABAP stack and the database in order to make the ABAP code database independent. So you have just a few commands in SQL, in OpenSQL, to do whatever you need to do to read and write data in your SAP system. And there's also a proprietary system-to-system communication protocol called Remote Function Call, RFC, by which SAP systems can talk to each other. It's all in the SAP world in some place or another, and we'll get back to most of these technological things in a few minutes. So if you talk to companies, what do you think do they say is the biggest risk for their SAP system? What is the biggest risk for a company running SAP with their systems? Any ideas? Come on, guys. Thank you very much, the gentleman at the third row or fourth row. Downtime, outage. That's the biggest risk because it costs a lot of money if your production comes to a halt. Can cost you millions per hour if your production comes to a halt. That's why downtime is the biggest risk, and you have to make sure your system is really operational, and you also have to make sure the custom code you're adding to your system is keeping your system operational and not vice versa. So now let's look into the statistics of what we discovered in our analysis. First of all, some words about statistics. To be very honest, of course, you can take some numbers, shake them, bring them into some perspective, and prove a point that you want to make. So, of course, statistics are not absolutely neutral. They are not objective. So, what we are showing you here might therefore, not be totally objective. That's just what I want to say here. Statistics can be twisted. For example, you try to shoot a rabbit. You miss the rabbit 5 meters to the left. You shoot again. You miss the rabbit 5 meters to the right. But statistically, the rabbit is dead now. So this is statistics. You can twist them. So let's have a look what we found out. We have analyzed and we are still analyzing the code of large organizations worldwide. This statistic is based on results of 217 different companies across the world. So these companies have diverse quality assurance processes and maturity levels. Some already did some testing, some didn't. Some had extensive guidelines, others hadn't. Some used tools, others didn't, and so on. So they're quite diverse in what they have done process-wise. They are of various corporate sizes. There are mega corporations among them where we looked at one of their systems, and there are very small companies among them where we looked at one of their systems. They have a different length of history with SAP. Some run SAP for more than 20 years, others just maybe for 1 or 2 years. And they're also from various industry sectors and countries. So there's a very good mixture of those, and we think that the analysis is therefore quite representative, also due to the large number of companies that we've scanned. How did we build this code benchmark? I mean, you cannot manually, or you probably cannot manually analyze 450 million lines of code for various mistakes in your lifetime. So we use the static code analysis tool to check for various problems in the area of performance, robustness, security, and compliance. But we're only focusing on security in this talk, on things we found over there. So I mean, we only considered the critical mistakes in the code. Of course, critical is again a relative term. It's our perspective of critical. It's not all the mistakes we found. It's the one that we think are really dangerous, and they made it into statistics. And the data collection of the statistics, to give this some frame, is between 2013 and 14, and the 2015 information is not yet in there. We will do that next year maybe again, when we have a significant rise in the companies that we tested. So the output of that can be accessed online as well, if you like. So there's a QR tag if you want to do that now. It's also linked if you have a presentation later on. And it's a PDF document where the entire analysis is included, meaning also performance and robustness. So general statistics. Now the real fun begins. So on average, and this is the first insight we got, every company running SAP on average has 2.8 million lines of custom code per system they run. Not entirely over the company, per system. And what does that mean? How many systems do large organizations have? How many SAP systems? Any ideas? More than 10? The friendly man on the left side bets more than 10. Who bets more? More than 100. Ah, yeah, the gentleman raised their hands. Yes, exactly. Some companies even have 200 to 300 production SAP systems. Not just test systems, but production systems. So it's really a lot some companies have. Others are more in the more than 10 area that you mentioned, right? But the ones that are running SAP for a long time, they can have more than 100. And if you multiply this number with more than 100, you understand the magnitude of the custom code they have created.
There's a lot of overlap, I guess.
Overlap?
I mean, if you have like development, test, and then
yes, of course. You are right, Joris. Thank you very much. If you are looking at the same production line, you have overlap because the code is transported between the systems. But usually per productive system, you have a different production line. Well, the question is, if you don't see customers that distribute their code across many of their production systems, yes, they do. But if you try to tweak the analysis to this kind of topology, it's very difficult to sort out this code. So for the sake of simplicity, we just took one system in all of these companies, scanned it, and added it to the statistics in an anonymized form, so it cannot be traced back to the company. Yes, Joris, please.
Was there a specific system, like you always took ECC or CRM?
The question is if it was a specific systems, like, for example, always ECC. actually, no. We offered the company to give us access to any of their systems they think might be good for analysis. So maybe per accident it were all ACC systems, I have no idea, but the company always made the decision we didn't do that.
I guess that's where often the most custom code is written, in the ECC core system.
So your guess is that the ECC core system contains most of the custom code. Probably yes, yeah. But again, I don't know. So, and the statistic does not really look at that. But it's just found out that 2.0 million lines of code you find on average per SAP system, which proves that the companies do not run pure SAP standard solutions. So they have to do significant changes to the SAP standard to adapt to their business processes, or at least it's their perception that they have to do these changes. Maybe they don't have to do the changes, but actually they're doing them. So the second interesting thing that we found is, if you look at the type of programming that's used, 64% of all the code modules is forms, which means in technical programming terms, procedures. It's not object-oriented. Only 19% is object-oriented code in methods. So that means the code these companies programmed is probably very old and it's very difficult to reuse. And probably they have to throw that away at some point and change it into object-oriented code. So it's not, yeah, from a quality perspective, this kind of code is not very good for maintenance. Here, now we come closer to security. On average, there are 14,500 additional input sources created by custom code. So what does that mean? It means that the attack surface of your software significantly rises due to the custom code you're adding, because there are many additional entry points where hackers or attackers can feed in malicious stuff. So this is a statistical increase of your attack surface. It exposes your software more to the outside, which increases the risk of an exploit. Also, if you look at the input sources, 78% of this input comes from SAP GUI applications, which is, like I mentioned earlier, the specific tool SAP wrote to access their backend. Most applications that exist are actually run through SAP GUI. And 18% of the code, this is also interesting, is for machine-to-machine communication. It's functions that can be called remotely from the outside. So therefore, if you think a little bit about the risk that introduces, the malicious insider in an SAP context is the person that has the highest likeliness to find some vulnerabilities, because most of the code is exposed, at least of the custom code, I'm not talking about the standard, is exposed to SAP GUI. So if you have a chance that there's something going wrong, probably that's the vector it will be exploited, or maybe also that vector, but this is the human interaction vector. That's where people look at usually and may per accident find things.
Just out of curiosity, did you find a system where no line of code was found, custom code?
The question is if we found a system where there was no line of custom code. No, Joris, there wasn't. There wasn't. There always. But we found some with 40 million on a single. So there's quite a variance of the magnitude. So now here come some very interesting general things. There are more quality issues with database access than there is database access in custom code. This is astonishing. If you look at the numbers, there's on average 24,000 open SQL queries through the independent database layer to the database. But we can even spread it between read and write access, where you see mostly it's read, but we have also a significant amount of custom code that changes SAP data. But there's 26,000 quality mistakes in open SQL queries, distributed across all test areas, which means it's also performance, it's mainly performance, it's also mainly robustness, but it's also security, things like SQL injection. So there's actually, that means that if you write a database query and custom code, you have a good guess it's wrong to some extent. Something with it is wrong, statistically speaking. And another interesting output is that only 0.3% of all SAP modules, custom modules, can be directly accessed via HTTP. So the smallest portion of ABAP applications is accessible through the web. The internet, the intranet, it's just a insignificantly small number. That means that security solutions that are web-focused don't really help you securing your SAP system. Yes, they secure some part of it, but not really very much. Especially not the part that you have written yourself. Forget that. So, more statistics on security and compliance now. There's one critical security issue / compliance issue in 1,000 lines of custom code. That's a very sound average number we found. That means that per system you have more than 2,000 critical security issues in your custom code. Again, I'm not talking about the SAP standard here. It's just your custom code. By adding custom code, you really make the security situation you have created through a lot of other measures like GRC, like encryption, roles authorizations. You ruin all that by adding custom code because it really draws your system down. It makes it exposable to hackers, makes it exploitable. It introduces flaws of all kinds. So these are the 5 most top common security problems you have in code. We broke that down to certain categories like authorization flaws, which is everything you can do wrong with the authorizations. You need to check for access. And the probability here indicates the chance that you have at least one of these problems in your SAP system computed across all of the customers we have scanned. And this is the average number of occurrences you find of problems like that on your system. So you clearly see authorization problems are everywhere. And this is really surprising because roles and authorizations are the one thing SAP has been preaching to their customers for years and years and years. And still, this is the most common mistake in custom code. I really don't get it. This is, to me, very surprising that this problem is there everywhere. In every SAP installation that we've checked, they have lots and lots of authorization mistakes. They also make the mistakes everyone else does, directory traversal. 91% probability of having at least one directory traversal. And probably you have a lot of them, more than 300 per system. Very bad. And directory traversal means somebody can mess up your file system, can read files that are critical that you don't want to expose, or even change files or delete files that you don't want to be changed or deleted. And on an SAP server, there's a lot of files that are interesting. Batch data could be stored there. The certificates are in the file system. For example, SAP transports can be there. A lot of critical information is in files, and including the log files. Some of the log files are also files, which could be manipulated or read through a directory traversal. There's also significant code that directly modifies SAP standard database tables, which custom code really should not do, especially not without proper checks. Because if you change an SAP standard table, you must make sure that you're checking the correct authorization to do that. Is the user authorized to really change that data? Do you write the correct change documents for that table? So the change you make is in an audit testable and still transparent. And there are many mistakes in that area as well. Cross-client access. I told you earlier that it's possible to host data of multiple organizations isolated in the same database in SAP. You can have 10 companies in the same system or 100, and all of them can log on and work with the data totally isolated, which is a good idea. But there is the possibility from ABAP to skip that protection, to cross the border and reach into the other customers' data on the same database. And The chance that this happens is 83% per system, with 122 occurrences where ABAP code simply ignores this barrier and interacts with data from organizations this program should have no access to. Very bad. SQL injection. I mentioned earlier that SAP has a specific SQL layer, OpenSQL, between your ABAP code and the database. And this SQL layer is also susceptible to some degree to SQL injection with, again, some frequency. However, the occurrences are not really dramatic. This is something you can get rid of quite easily with a remediation process. This here is something you have to spend on significant effort. And we're still talking only about one system. You have to do that in all your systems. So another striking thing is, out of the pool of critical issues, there are per average 10 vulnerabilities that are so grave that the attacker has total control over your SAP system. Total control. I'm not talking about an authorization mistake where somebody can, by accident, read a certain HR table and run away with the data. No, I'm talking about a mistake by which, exploiting it, you own the entire box. 10 out of them. And now we want to see, what does it mean, total control over an SAP system? This is, again, a very broad and generic term. We want to demonstrate that, and this is why I brought my dear friend and colleague Xu here to show us what this means.
Yes, thank you, Andreas. Hello, everybody. Yes, I want to show you what does it mean to own an SAP system. So, yeah, I think maybe things like that is owning an SAP system. So, actually, you can play with it. Yeah, that means if you're a good game player, maybe you can own an SAP system. My question is, yes, do you have any idea what it means owning an SAP system? ABAP code injection. Not bad. And then?
What can you do when you own it?
Play Super Mario.
What except Super Mario can you do if you own an SAP system?
Everything.
Everything is a very good term, but more management-like, what can you do?
Change data, get out all data, render it unavailable.
Okay. Get money out of it.
Kill the business, shut down the business.
Kill the business, shut down the business.
Refund my troopers 10 times.
Ah,
Raise your salary.
Any further ideas? Yeah, what we could do is also to elevation our privileges. So that means to create another user. I will show you how it works. So actually, to show you, we can create a new user. I have to show you that the user does not exist on the system. So as a hacker, I will say I can only think about such stupid name as I kill you as a user. Yeah, you can see here, user IQ does not exist. So the user is not there. Okay, so then I will log off. I will now log on with another user, that is the attacker. He has just limited access to the system. That means there's no SE18, there's no authorization, no SE60, no STMS, nothing. Really, really limited. But what he can do, the only thing he can do is execute and report. That means in SE38, yeah, what he can do. He can also play Super Mario, yeah? But per accident, she found another report which has the OS command injection. So I want to show you that one OS command injection, this vulnerability can let an attacker own your system. Yeah. So what an attacker will try at the beginning is as to list the files. Obviously not working. So, but the hacker won't give up. So that means he try with another command. Now looks better. Yeah, and so obviously this is a Windows system below. Yeah. And so what I want to do is I prepared 2 files in an external server. The server could be in China or somewhere else. Yeah. Both files. And the evil hacker, please don't try with this domain. Yeah. Both files should be copied to the SAP system. The first thing is I will show you the folder. There's a transport in the SAP system. That means one file should be copied to the code files folder and the other file should be copied to the data folder. Yeah. And let's just do it. I'm actually using PowerShell here. Can download things. It takes, but it's working. So let's check if the file is really there. So you can see that the file here is just created today, just seconds ago, and it's in our SAP system from China. Yeah. So let's do the same for another file. It's the same. And this works again. So now we have both files from remote server to our SAP system. Yeah, and remember, the user I'm currently on the system has only limited access. So now I will start the transport. Oh, sorry. And it says everything's okay. Yeah, the transport is added to the buffer. There's one more step, then we are on our go. Wait. Yeah, still everything okay. So now we try again. With the user, I kill you. So let's see what's happened. Remember that the user does not on the system. And we are in. It's the new user we created and now in the system. And better, the user has more privileges as the original user. That means he can go to every transaction he wants. Sorry. Yeah. And the user is there. Yeah.
Thank you, Shu. So this shows you what to do with an OS command injection, how you can, from such a seemingly technical problem, right into the core of your SAP system, getting a user with highest privileges that can basically access all data in your system by one of the flaws in these 10 vulnerabilities. And every customer has 10 of these on every of their servers statistically because of their custom code. Thank you for the demo, Shu. So another one interesting figure is You have approximately 184 proprietary authorization checks, which means authorization checks that are not based on the authority check command, which is available in ABAP, but based on the username that is logged on. This is very poor to do that, and auditors will really not like that. 91% chance that you have at least one of those in your custom code per server, which means if you have more than one server, you have one of these problems statistically. This will give you a red traffic light in financial audits. Financial auditors really do not like using custom authorizations because this is the one thing they're looking at, authorizations. They don't understand things like what Shu has showed you, like command injection and stuff. They don't understand it, but this is the one they're looking at, and you have a lot of it, probably. Also, custom code raises the number of RFC-enabled function modules, the machine-to-machine communication modules, by 476. And only 64% of them have their own authority checks. Have no authority checks. 36 only have authority checks, which means this code is not only exposing the attack surface, but also highly likely to let people in because they do not check specific authorizations for what the module is doing. Another statistic I really like, if you compare the number of instances where somebody made correct authorization check to the number of mistakes they make per system, it's also increasing. Interesting that there's a strong bias toward there is more mistakes in authorization than there are correct authorization checks. Like before, there's more mistakes with database access than there is database access. These are very sad numbers. And why are they there? Because the guidelines of most companies focus on naming conventions. Excellent. Huh? So, of course, this is a very poor situation. The code quality of custom systems is really poor, but there's still some hope in theory. So you could follow some best practices in order to change things. In order to really get a change, you need to do an awareness workshop with your management. If you want to do something without the backup of your management, it won't work. You can try to do something, but you cannot change the code of a big organization by goodwill. You need the management to enforce that. You need to convince them. You need to show them what's possible. You need to show them a vulnerability like what we've just seen here. A 5-minute demo from Shu, for example, or one of the, or many other good researchers out there that shows the management what we have done in the past years is fundamentally wrong. We've spent millions of dollars or euros on GRC, on roles and authorizations, but we totally neglected, for example, code. All our code is bugged, statistically speaking. So you need to show management that you have to do something. And then you should set achievable goals when you change something. No developer will learn 100 new secure coding practices overnight. That's not possible. Start small. Give them the top critical problems first. Show them what a command injection is, what a code injection is, what a SQL injection is, and get rid of the 10 killer problems on all of your systems first. Then expand to the next phase of problems. For example, the ones that give you the red lights in financial audits. But do it slowly, otherwise you're just confusing people. Also, you need a plan how to deal with legacy code. If you're calculating 2 million lines of code across the organization, you're talking about millions and millions of lines of code you might have to potentially clean up. This will cost you a lot of time and a lot of money. So think about what time you need, but also think about that it's not economically viable to correct all of them. It doesn't make sense to correct all issues. Devise a plan which are the issues you need to get rid of and which are the ones that you can keep in your system, or other ways to minimize the effort to do that. Because I know of no single company that actually killed all the bugs in their code. Actually, that's wrong. I was once doing a source code audit for a company in China. It's the only company that corrected all of the mistakes we found. No exceptions, all of them. I know of no other company that ever did that because it's economically not viable to do it. But you need to get rid of all the important ones, and then you have to accept the residual risk. Also, you need meaningful development guidelines. Yes, you can launch a 200-page guideline that tells developers what to do, but they will not understand this. But you should focus on the most important areas for your business. Check in, how important is performance for me? How good would it be if I overhaul my code and the performance would rise by factor 10 or 20 just by writing better access to the database layer? That would be a measurable goal you can have to promote your code guideline changes. Or add more stability to your code, reduce the number of dumps, and of course add more security. Focus on all the relevant areas for your company. And also, do not forget external development. If you only train your internal developers, your code will not get better. If you are dependent on outsourced code, you have to have policies for these external developers, and you have to enforce that. And you should consider that the moment you ask people to give you quotes for building new code, you should tell them, we only pay you money if the code you deliver is high quality in terms of security, performance, robustness, and what else comes to our mind. But the code will be tested, and it must meet our requirements. And be advised, application security is a very difficult concept to understand for developers. In contrast to performance and robustness, which is straightforward to understand, if I forget the index, yes, the query in the database will be slower. Yeah? Or if I forget to check the result code of the function, then I might cause a crash because I have no exception handling. But security is usually thinking around the corner, and it's very difficult for people to understand that. So your developers must be specifically trained to understand this. It's a real challenge. And you need tools if you want to check if your code is in compliance with your guidelines, because with the sheer number of code we are talking about, it's not viable to hire 1,000 people to do code quality management. That doesn't help you. You need tools. Only testable requirements can be enforced. If it's not testable, you can scratch it. Nobody will do it because nobody can find out that they didn't. Also, only the tools to give you the transparency to see that what you're doing is good, that where you're standing today. You cannot do something, then send 1,000 auditors to the code, have it analyzed, and 3 months later maybe you know what your quality is. You must be able to scan that every night or every week or whatever your needs are. And definitely you need to measure the success of your activities in order to show management, yes, we moved something. We improved the quality of our code. It's now more stable, it's more secure, it's even faster. Only success will give you the basis for a long-lasting change in your process. If you implement that and there is no success, your management will kill it maybe the next year or the year after that. So what else is the output of our benchmark? The code quality benchmark, the business code quality benchmark we created at VirtualForge, which we have demonstrated here, is the first benchmark that has been done of its kind. And it's used to provide guidance for companies developing their own ABAP code in various ways. First of all, the BSEC App 11 standard for application security faults in ABAP is based on the outcome. The most common and the most dangerous problems which are presented by BSEC, a business security community of which many companies are speakers at this Troopers conference, is based on the statistical findings we had here. Also, recently released, the German Federal Office of Information Security, Bundesamt für Sicherheit, has published one of our papers about the top 20 critical ABAP risks. There's also a link about that. This is also based on the statistical insights we gained from the analysis. So the BSEC App 11 list can be seen here if you want to use that as a benchmark for your own company. And the BSI ABAP Top 20 is also in the slides if you want to use that as a first benchmark for your company in order to change something. Conclusions. Written incorrectly. If your company runs up, statistically speaking, it has significant quality issues in your custom code. Your company is exposed to at least the following risks. System downtime. Every vulnerability can cause a system downtime. Shu could have killed the system from the OS command injection with a simple format C, for example, and your server is gone very easily. Code issues create red lights in financial audits, which is a risk for your company. Industrial espionage due to data leaks in your code is a risk to your company. Of course, manipulation of your business data is a risk to your company. When somebody suddenly changes the chemical formulas you have or the way you produce your cars, it's not a good idea. And the code could also contain backdoors because some companies outsource and they may have malicious parties sitting in some other countries that want a backdoor in your system. And all of that can have a huge impact. And how do you find out that? Not by running naming conventions in your guidelines and tests like that. So the next steps, and with that we come to the conclusion of the talk, we invite all the companies out there to take part in our study. Pick one of your SAP systems, let us scan it, you get results for the entire scan for free, and you contribute this output anonymously to our results to get even more precise numbers in the future. So that's the starting point to have something you can show to your management and discuss the results of that. And tell people, this is how our company looks like. Yes, the statistics say we have problems, but this shows and proves we have problems. We should do something. Then you should think about optimizing your process because, I'm not joking, you have issues in your custom code. Each company sitting here that runs SAP has significant problems in their custom code. You should optimize your process. You should make it better. And maybe next year you can lean back and say, well, yes, we achieved something. We made something better. And this is the spirit of Troopers. Make the world a safer place. Make your ABAP code a safer place. Make your company a safer place. Thank you, Enno. Yeah, and if you have further questions, you can at any time approach me, co-profiler, or Shubgot on Twitter and ask. Or now. Thank you very much for your attention. No questions? Oh, yours.
Yeah, sorry for asking so many questions, but I think this is an interesting topic. Sorry for that.
No problem.
You showed, I think, that on average there was one defect in like every 1,000 lines of custom code. Is there any figure that you have on standard SAP code about that? Does it, I mean, is it better? Is it worse?
And this is a nasty question, Joris. And since we are online, I will not answer that in public, but everyone who has interest in that, we can talk offline about that. I don't want to say anything about SAP standard code here today.
Okay. We'll do that offline.
We can talk later at dinner. Thank you.
Based on that question, another question, do you already have any experiences about the new SAP products like HANA Enterprise Cloud or Suite for HANA?
Well, they wouldn't allow us to install our scanner in the cloud, but maybe we can talk with SAP about that. And yeah, maybe we will have a future talk about the quality of these applications as well. But at this point, like I said in the beginning, everybody or many people have spoken about vulnerabilities in the standard. We just wanted to make a point that there are also there's other homework to do in your own house, in your own company, which has nothing to do with whatever SAP is doing. Of course, these are sound and valid questions, but not the focus on our research right now. Thank you. Another question? Pardon?
If you can make the code available for Super Mario.
Oh, yeah. Just ask Shu, he will share it with your company. It will boost the fun factor in your organization by 10 at least. Maybe we should sell applications like that. Maybe we earn more money with that than with security. Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, yes.
Comment, not a question, that in our experience, it's easy to run the code. It's still easy to identify issues, even present to the management. But when it actually comes to cleaning the code, we are still finding a lot of challenges. As I said, it's not a question, but it's a comment out of the experience that we have had in trying to kill the old code and to clean up vulnerabilities like command injection, cross-site.
Yeah, you're right. This is a huge challenge in companies to deal with the legacy code. That's what I had. That's why I had it in the slides. It's a real challenge how to set up a change like that in your organization in a way your organization can handle it. Different organizations have had different approaches on doing that, which succeeded. But there are definitely some things you should do in the beginning to analyze. For example, what if the code that I run is dead code? If I identify the dead code, I can kill it, and I don't have to reprogram it in order to remove all the vulnerabilities. By simply deleting it, I maybe get rid of 30% of my issues easily. Things like that you have to consider, but it's a challenge. Yeah. And it's also sometimes the reason why the companies don't want to start an initiative, because they think, oh, if we do that, if we scan our systems and we suddenly know that we have thousands of compliance problems, we don't want to know that, we don't start. Yeah, really, that's not a joke. Companies did that in the past. They said, we don't want to have this problem now. We do that maybe sometime later, but we don't want to have anything to do with this now. Because of the legacy code. If you start SAP from scratch, somebody becomes an SAP customer today, or maybe last week, they haven't written much code, then they can say, well, we start it the right way. We have good guidelines from the beginning. But most companies have SAP for a longer period in time, and they have a big history of problems. Thank you for the comment. Any more comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much.